Boleh saya minta tepuk tangannya yang lebih keras? Terima kasih banyak. Masih bersama saya Suci Patia dan senang sekali siang ini kita rasanya masih berbagi energi positif yang sama, antusiasme yang sama. Karena walaupun beberapa rangkaian acara sudah kita lewati sama-sama, kita masih memiliki beberapa rangkaian acara lagi sampai dengan kita selesaikan seluruh rangkaian hari ini. Hadirin sekalian, selamat datang di sesi Middle Powers Rising. Kiat negara-negara yang sukses menjalankan kebijakan iklim menjadi pertumbuhan ekonomi di abad ke-21. Dan saya yakin nanti narasumber-narasumber yang akan hadir di atas panggung ini akan memberikan kita banyak sekali wawasan, memperkaya perspektif kita, dan yang pasti mudah-mudahan ini menginspirasi dan membawa langkah kita lebih berani untuk menuju perubahan dan menyelamatkan bumi kita tercinta. Namun sebelum itu, kita akan mengundang seseorang naik ke atas panggung yang mudah-mudahan ini juga bisa menggugah semangat kita sebagai anak muda. Dan kita akan mengundang Elfrieda Manurung Natkaim untuk memberikan orasi dalam sesi kali ini. Kami silakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiwastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan, Rahayu. Good afternoon ladies and gentlemen. Sebelum saya memulai speech saya akan menyapa para hadirin sekalian dalam bahasa Amungme. Jadi ketika saya bilang amolongo, mohon semua menjawab amole. Amolongo? Terima kasih. First of all, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to open the session Turning Climate Action into Sustainable Growth Engines. Perkenalkan, nama saya Elfrieda Manurung Natkaim. Saya berasal dari ujung timur Indonesia, Kampung Wa, Tembagapura, Papua Tengah. Dan saat ini saya adalah mahasiswa aktif semester akhir di Oregon State University. Jurusan yang saya ambil adalah Sustainable Agriculture in Crop and Soil dan Resilient Agroeconomy. I'm not a climate or not zero expert, but I'm passionate about preserving sustainable and culturally rooted farming yang melindungi lingkungan, mendukung ketahanan pangan, dan memperkuat komunitas yang teguh dan mandiri secara ekonomi. Saya berdiri di sini bukan hanya sebagai mahasiswa, tetapi sebagai perempuan adat Amungme yang percaya bahwa masa depan Indonesia bisa tumbuh dari tanah dan dari tangan para petani kita. Bagi kami, suku Amungme, bertani bukan sekedar profesi. Itu adalah identitas, budaya, dan warisan hidup yang sudah ada dari generasi ke generasi. As we face the global challenge of climate change, it is essential our action not only address environmental concerns, but also honor the cultural integrity and sovereignty of indigenous community. Puji Tuhan, kalau misalnya 2 minggu lalu, saya baru saja menyelesaikan penelitian saya bersama Dr. Praises TB, melanjutkan studi Profesor Caroline Cook, tentang sistem pertanian suku Amungme. Penelitian ini juga didasari oleh kolaborasi legal antara universitas yaitu Oregon State University dan Universitas Kristen Indonesia Tomohon. Sebagai bagian dari tim kolaborasi ini, saya didampingi oleh Dr. Praises CB, seorang pakar psikolog yang sangat berpengalaman. Pemilihan awal metode dan pendekatan dalam kolaborasi ini difokuskan kepada pendekatan psikologi untuk memahami perubahan manusia, sumber daya manusia dalam konteks budaya dan pertanian masyarakat adat. Meskipun mereka hidup berdampingan, meskipun kami hidup berdampingan sudah puluhan tahun dengan salah satu perusahaan tambang emas terbesar di dunia, tambang ini telah membawa banyak perubahan di tanah kami, infrastruktur, pendidikan, ekonomi, kemasyarakatan, dan layanan kesehatan. Namun pertanyaannya adalah, apakah semua ini membuat kami, masyarakat Amungme dan budaya kami, melupakan budaya kami sebagai masyarakat Amungme, orang Amungme sendiri? Hasil dari penelitian kami menunjukkan tradisi ini tidak hilang. Pertanian tetap hidup. Banyak anak muda, bahkan sepupu-sepupu saya yang mereka masih SD hingga perguruan tinggi, ketika hari libur mereka kembali ke kampung mereka untuk membantu orang tua mereka di ladang. Hal ini menunjukkan bahwa tradisi dan kemajuan bisa berjalan bersama, asal didasari dengan rasa saling menghargai. Seperti pesan dari orang tua kami, yaitu kakek saya, Kepala Besar Suku Amungme, Tuareg Natkaim, mengatakan, Buk Negelme, dalam bahasa Amungme yang berarti pemilik tanah, dan Eral Negelme, dalam bahasa Amungme yang berarti pemilik uang harus berdiri sama tinggi dan duduk sama rendah di atas tanah ini. Sebagai perempuan adat dan orang percaya, saya yakin bahwa Tuhan memberi kita tanggung jawab untuk menjaga bumi. Pertanian adalah salah satu cara paling nyata untuk menjawab tantangan itu. Dan jika kita berbicara tentang aksi iklim di wilayah adat, maka ada 4 hal penting ini yang perlu diperhatikan. First, let's recognize indigenous knowledge system. Indigenous communities have long practiced sustainable ways of living. Aksi iklim yang efektif harus dimulai dengan menghargai dan menggabungkan pengetahuan ekologis mereka yang mendalam. Second, let's foster community-led solution. Solution must be co-created with indigenous community, not imposed. Solusi iklim harus dirancang dan dijalankan bersama masyarakat adat, bukan datang dari luar begitu saja. Third, let's address historical and environmental impacts. Indigenous people often suffer the most from climate change. Despite contributing the least, kita perlu mendukung pemulihan lahan, akses air bersih, dan pengembangan energi terbarukan yang sesuai nilai dan hak budaya mereka. Yang terakhir, let's build long-term partnership. Real change require lasting relationship based on trust, respect, and shared goals. Ini berarti membangun kemitraan jangka panjang melalui pendidikan, kepemimpinan anak muda, dan penguatan sistem pangan lokal. Invest in climate education that includes indigenous knowledge, collaborate with university, civil society, and local leaders, support youth leadership, and strengthen local food markets. As an indigenous woman and believer, I believe that God created everything from the solar system, nature, and human, and us human, and from all of His creation, He gave us human the greatest responsibility to take care of the earth. Kita tidak bisa hanya menjadi penonton, kita adalah penjaga ciptaan Tuhan yang sudah diberikan, dan pertanian adalah jalan untuk menjaga bumi, memperkuat ekonomi, dan membangun masa depan yang berkelanjutan dan adil bagi seluruh masyarakat Indonesia. Dan tentu saja saya ingin mengucapkan sekali lagi terima kasih kepada Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia dan seluruh anggota atas kesempatan luar biasa ini sebagai perempuan adat untuk bisa membagikan pemikiran saya mengenai praktik pertanian yang berkelanjutan dan berbasis budaya dalam komunitas adat dan dapat membantu menjawab tantangan perubahan iklim ini. Saya percaya suara kecil saya hari ini bisa menjadi bagian dan gerakan besar menuju Indonesia yang berdaulat, adil, dan mandiri di tanahnya sendiri. Amolongo, terima kasih.
What an amazing speech, sangat menyentuh sekali. Terima kasih sekali lagi kepada Alfrida Manurung Natkaim. Boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan lagi, kita berikan apresiasi yang sebesar-besarnya. Dan tentunya saya senang sekali bahwa dalam acara Indonesia Net Zero Summit ini disediakan ruang untuk anak-anak muda bisa bersuara. Terima kasih, kita berikan momen dulu bersama Pak Dino. Ya, no, it's okay Pak Dino. Oh no, masih ada satu video Pak. Oke. Ya, tadi saya senang sekali bahwa acara ini memberikan ruang untuk anak-anak muda bisa bersuara sebagai agen perubahan, di mana itu juga menyadarkan kita bahwa kita sebagai manusia punya tanggung jawab yang penuh untuk menjaga lingkungan dan juga menjaga bumi kita. Dan untuk selanjutnya kita akan melihat sejenak video remarks yang akan disampaikan oleh CEO of COP30, Anna Tony.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be with all of you, even though from far away, at this Indonesian Net Zero Summit. I would like first to start thanking the foreign policy community of Indonesia for bringing us together and greet all the colleagues, partners and friends participating in this important meeting. The topic of this session couldn't be more timely. How climate action can become a true engine of sustainable growth, especially for countries like ours, with strategic roles, with social diversity, with powerful ecosystems. From the perspective of COP30 presidency, I would like to share perhaps 5 key reflections here. First, poverty eradication and climate action are deeply connected. addressing climate crisis is not only a barrier of development, it is a foundation for fair, resilient, and inclusive economies. For example, in the case of Brazil, we were able to reduce in 46% deforestation in the last 2 years, at the same time that we took out from poverty around 9 million people and more than 20 million people out from food insecurity. This shows that eradicating poverty and taking climate action are deeply connected. So that's the first point. The second point I would like to highlight, that investing in adaptation and mitigation is not just a cost, it's also an investment. A recent studies shows that adaptation action can deliver on average a return of around 27% for each dollar that is investing in adaptation can help to avoid up to $4 of future losses. So investing on adaptation will help us not to invest on, for example, loss and damage in the future. That's not just a smart policy, it is also good for economics, investing in adaptation. My third point has to do with our top tropical forests. This is not a liability, it's a big resources that our countries have. They are strategic global assets, and we should be valued as such. Developed countries must recognize this true and fair and predictable climate finance for protecting forests. Brazil has launched, together with Indonesia and all the other countries, the TFFF, the Forest Forever Facility, as a new economic instrument that will help us to have the recognition of the very important work that countries like Indonesia and Brazil are doing in protecting our forests for the global good. This must be valued and paid for the people that are protecting forests. Obviously, all this debate about climate finance and the roadmap to 1.3 and bringing investment from developed to developing countries for climate only makes sense when it is based on strong NDCs, nationally determined contributions. This is a very important year, and at COP30 this will be a fundamental topic, which is all countries coming together, bringing the NDCs. Also to ask all governments to bring the NDCs that are investable, that have detailed plans, sectoral plans, economy-wide NDCs, because that will be able to help the investments, the attraction of investment to our countries. Fourth, policy consistency is a very important matter. Climate ambition can only be translated into action if it becomes a state policy, not just a government program. That must be a whole government and a state policy. International cooperation plays a vital role in helping our countries in building institutional capacity and to ensure that we have also the capacity to maintain the institutions that we have and to give us that capacity support. For example, helping us to have capacity and technology for our country platforms and maintaining our country platforms as a way from a bottom-up perspective from our own institutions to be able to attract investment. And finally, diplomacy. Diplomacy is also middle-income countries' strengths. Middle countries have the ability to build bridges, to reduce polarization, to foster trust, and to unlock collective progress. This is the spirit of COP30, a COP of acceleration of implementation, based in the Amazon but open to the world. We wanted to focus on results, inclusion, and last transformation for our people and for our economies, and obviously with sustainability. Let us talk this path together. Thank you so much for your invitation. I look forward learning about the results of the meeting that you have that will be brought then to COP30 in November. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Anna Tony, CEO of COP30. Baik hadirin sekalian, luar biasa sekali tadi di sesi kali ini kita sudah membuka rangkaian acara. Ini dengan mendengarkan amazing voice yang disampaikan oleh Elfrida Manurung Natkime. Yang ini juga sekali lagi mengingatkan kita apapun latar belakang kita, apapun gender kita, siapa keluarga kita punya tanggung jawab penuh untuk menjaga lingkungan dan juga bumi kita. Dan sekarang kita akan deep dive into sesi Middle Powers Rising, kiat negara-negara yang sukses menjalankan kebijakan iklim menjadi pertumbuhan ekonomi di abad ke-21. Untuk itu saya ingin mengundang moderator kita di sesi kali ini, our role model and our inspiration, the one and only, pendiri dan ketua Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, Dr. Dinopati Jalal.
Wow, everyone's still here. Thank you for joining this session. This is going to be a very interesting session on... Oh, I'm sitting there? Oh, okay, sorry. I've been kicked out of my seat. So this is going to be an interesting session on middle powers and sustainability. The US pulled out was a big deal, as we discussed this morning. And the natural question is, who's going to do the push now? Who's going to lead the way once one of the biggest economy and one of the bigger player has pulled out? And the answer is middle powers. And there are middle powers in every region of the world. And now there are about 24 middle powers around the world. Yeah? Middle power being defined as not great power, but certainly not small power, but countries that have the weight, the size, and the ambition to play an active role on the international stage. So on climate change also, a lot of these middle powers are punching above weight. Yeah, Brazil is now leading COP, yeah, being the host of COP. And we're also going to hear from South Africa, from Turkey, and from Australia and from Indonesia. 3 of these are members of MICTA, yeah, and some of them are member of BRICS, yeah, just like Indonesia. And they all have progressive policies on climate change, and a lot of us are counting on them on just pushing the needle forward and ensuring the success of COP30 and beyond. Right. So with that, I would like to invite all the panelists to the podium, and let's give them a big hand. Yeah. Good. Mbak Mary, you sit next to me? Yes, yes. Okay. Good. So I'll start with Indonesia. Mbak Mary, welcome. And I see you all over the place. Mbak Mary is obviously a celebrity in Indonesia. She was the managing director of World Bank, right? Okay. You all right? Okay. Tolong dibantu ininya. Got it. Okay. So Mbak Mary, I'll start with you. President Prabowo has announced very high ambition of 8% growth for Indonesia. We've never had that ever, I think since Suharto, yeah? That was many, many decades ago. And he's said that he wants to achieve 100% renewables, and he has a big ambition of the makanan bergizi gratis, free nutrition meal for all Indonesian children. And a big budget for defense department, 170 trillion. Yeah, right. So the question is, how are we gonna square all this to achieve 8% growth but also achieve our net zero target, which is 2060 or earlier, but President Prabowo has said that we can achieve it at 2050. So, easy question.
Thank you, Dino. Good to be here again. I think I've come every year to your FPSCE, so good to be back here. And yet in another challenging time that we are having this discussion. Let me try to answer your question. I have a three-part answer, perhaps. The first part of the answer is, okay, 8% growth in a sustainable manner. I think it's about developing a green growth strategy, which is actually part of the vision of the previous government, as well as, when we were in government together. It's basically, how can you achieve growth, but at the same time, do it in a sustainable manner? I think the notion of climate and growth as being trade-offs is thankfully no longer an issue. It was a big issue during our time and when we hosted COP back in 2007. But I think in the last few years, we have seen that developing countries recognize that they can develop as well as address sustainability. But it does require the right kind of strategy and the right kind of planning. Because if you, and the recognition that the real trade-off is inaction now with action now. Because if inaction now or business as usual is going to get you to a lower growth, lower development in the future, and that's kind of shown already in a way that when we have seen the impact of the damage of natural disasters on our agriculture and so on and so forth. So we're already seeing the results, and it'll get worse if we don't do anything, right? So the how-to is really the big question, right? So if you look at the way we have done our planning, medium 5-year plan and 25-year plan, we actually have, since I think 5 years ago, or maybe 8 years ago, integrated climate in our planning. And we have greenhouse gas emissions as targets. But now we have to adjust that because we have an 8% target. That's, I think, the first homework. So integrating the 8% target with our national planning and then identifying what does that mean for the prioritization of the sectors and the actions that need to be taken. And this is where I think we need to really do our homework to do what does it look on the macro level, what does it look like on the sectoral level, right? So the second part of the answer is, okay, it's nice to have aspirations and ambition like net zero by 2060 or earlier, 100% renewable energy by 2050, but we really need to figure out the how-to. And we need to design a country growth strategy or a green growth Indonesia plan, right? And I want to recognize Brazil. Brazil actually came up with this ecological transformation plan, which is done in a way which was a whole of government, whole of economy, whole of society way, I think much like what the opening speech just then mentioned, and came up with not just a plan of which priority sectors and what to do, but how to and what investments are needed and the financing, including how much government would come in to finance. Because it's one thing to say, I have these aspirations, but the how-to. So my last point is on the how-to. So the how-to is about the policy reforms that are needed. You need to have that overall plan. Find out what is your priority. In the case of Brazil, it's nature-based planning, mobility, I'm forgetting what the third one is. I just wrote it down there. Energy, right? Those are for us, it will probably be energy transition, forestry and land use, and I would say adaptation. We rarely talk about adaptation. So these are the three priority sectors. What do you need to do under each? And this is the issue. If you want to grow at 8%, we've identified you need $200 to $250 billion of investment in the next 5 years to grow at 8%. Isn't it? The idea would be that this investment would be investments in sustainability. So you'd have both growth and sustainability, and in those priority sectors. Energy transition and anything to do with energy, as well as the food and land use issues, and I would say greening industries, yeah, and decarbonization, greening industries, and new green industries, such as renewable energy and so on. I think I've run out of my 3 minutes, so that's just to outline to you about how we should be designing our green growth strategy, and we are within the government as well as with partners outside of the government actually quite intensively discussing this, because we are approaching, obviously, trying to come up with our second NDC. But the second NDC needs to be underpinned with a very credible, realistic, and hopefully implementable green growth strategy.
Okay, thank you. By the way, before you, 8% growth, just very quickly, where did that number come about? Why 8? Why not 7.5? Why not 7 or 6? Yeah.
Well, you'll have to ask the president. But from what we gather, it's a number that is intended to be, okay, here's the high call. If I ask you to do 7%, you probably will be, if you get to 6%, if I gave you 6%, you'll probably say, okay, 5% is fine. But if I gave you 8%, and maybe you'll get 7%, and that's actually already so much higher than before, right? So to him, I think it was more like, okay, here's the high call. And it will also mean, and it has meant, that every part of the government is like trying to figure out how do we actually do this.
Okay, all right. So it's like beating Australia in football, which is high call but possible. But beating Brazil is just a fantasy, right? So it's 8% is beating Australia, I hope, right? So, I'd like to ask now Nicole Figueiredo de Oliveira, who's Executive Director of Instituto Internacional Arayara. Yeah, I'll start with you. And actually, I'm going to give each one of you to give your 4-minute take on the green growth strategy that is adopted by your government. Nicole, please, we start with you. Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Nicole Oliveira, the Executive Director of Arayara. We are a Brazilian organization from the civil society, and we focus on energy transition. And we exist since more than 30 years, producing studies and technical knowledge, but also doing campaigns and mobilization and strategic litigation in Brazil and Latin America mainly. I'm very happy and grateful to be invited. And I prepared a presentation. No pressure, but I was told, do a TED Talk. So I prepared something for you. I hope you like it. Oh yeah, it's there. So, next please. Imagine an orchestra. The music is meant to save humanity from immense suffering and losses. The score is written and the stakes are very high. But the lead violinist quit. The cellists were caught in a bar fight. The percussionists were kidnapped by the mafia. And the worst of all, many of the musicians didn't even show for the rehearsal. That's what climate politics looks like today. Global stocktake shows that we are nowhere near keeping the temperature rise at 1.5 degrees. The United States left the Paris Agreement. National policies are not doing enough. Many countries are trapped, held captive by fossil fuel interests. Next, please. Meanwhile, next, please. Yeah, thank you. The world is changing fast. New conflicts and wars, new regional currencies, and the collapse of old power structures. Geopolitics, geoeconomy, geoenergy are being reshaped. AI is rewriting the rules of work, of knowledge, of everything. So let me ask you this. If the music is broken, musicians out of tune, why not change the entire song altogether? Countries like Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa, and Turkey, we are not side characters. Next, please. We are large economies, culturally rich, regionally influential. We are middle powers. But don't be fooled by the word middle. We are bridge builders, the tempo changers, the harmony makers. We don't need to wait for G7 to act. We have agency. We can write a new symphony, one that creates jobs, builds industries, and lifts millions into prosperity. Next, please. Let me tell you a little bit about my country, Brazil. We are the 5th largest country in the world in area. Our forests cover 5 million square kilometers, and they help to regulate the planet's temperature and water cycles. In 2024, we were the 4th largest solar installer in the world and with the cheapest costs. We have many contradictions. Our auctions, oil auctions, still happen, offering blocks in the Amazon basin. But we are proving that change is possible. With the right policies, we cut deforestation, as Anatoni mentioned, grew renewables, produced biofuels, and are electrifying our transportation. We sparked resistance from the ground up. We also created thousands of green jobs, especially in regions previously locked away from development. Next, please. So now is the moment to break free from the fossil fuel mafia, to stop playing to their rhythm, to stop subsidizing them, to stop being passive rule takers in the global economy. We can be composers of a new area, an area that not only protects the planet, but builds inclusive, equitable economy, where clean energy drives innovation, where energy transition is a job engine, not a job killer, and just energy transition that works for people, rooted in equity, dignity, and in our own sovereignty. Next, please. So, you young leaders of Indonesia have a part to play. Your country is home to the largest archipelago in the world, to tropical forests, to innovation, to beauty. And like Brazil, you are now at a crossroads. Together, we can reimagine what our economies are for. Not just GDP growth, but climate resilience, meaningful work, and regional leadership. Will we wait for the same broken band to fix itself? Or will we form a new orchestra, one that plays the music that our generation needs? Next, please. The world doesn't need another solo. It needs powerful collective action, written by middle powers and performed with courage. So let's not play someone else's music. Let's make it bold. Let's make it just. Let's make it the soundtrack of new jobs, thriving communities, and global justice. Let's make it loud to be heard in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. That was very moving. Thank you very much. I now turn to Lauren Hermanus from South Africa. She's the founding director of Southern Transitions. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here. So we can start with the first slide, please. I can go on. That's just, yes. Okay. So Southern Transitions is a Global South think tank and do tank, which is focused on transformative economic opportunities in the context of the global climate crisis and transition. But this is a picture of my home, and South Africa and Cape Town, where I live, is quite far from Jakarta. We are separated by almost 10,000 kilometers. And although this might seem very far apart, we have a centuries-old connection that spans back to the emergence of the global fossil fuel economy as we know it now. And the first Indonesians who were brought to Cape Town came as political exiles and were enslaved through the 17th and 18th century by Dutch imperialists. And through these painful ties, South Africa and Indonesia were also central to that first energy transition, fossil fuel energy transition, and both centers of global trade, but that time round for the benefit of colonial Europe. In these post-colonial times, we are also emerging as powerful economies, as middle powers, in a very different way, and we are again important centers of a brand new energy transition. This time, it must be driven by our sovereign sustainable development ambitions, by our efforts to power poverty alleviation, green industrialization, and to reduce inequalities within our countries and also between our countries and the rest of the world. So buried on that mountain is the first imam ever in Cape Town who came to us from Indonesia. So how do we tackle climate change in the context of our plans for green economic growth? Well, there are two sides to this coin in South Africa. So I'll start with the first, which is that in South Africa, we have a triple burden of poverty that's more than half of our economy, inequality, and unemployment, more than 30% of our people. And as we step up to play our part to achieve the global Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees, South Africa still remains heavily dependent on coal. In 2023, coal still counted for more than 80% of our total electricity, and it's pretty close still now. More than 150,000 direct and indirect jobs. And more than that, where there is coal employment and economic value creation, this is in one province in particular, in just 2 districts within that province, almost all the economic activities in that region are in some way tied to this coal production. At the same time, my country, which is famous for our liberation from apartheid, Nelson Mandela and his shirts, which came from here, our leadership on international human rights, beautiful landscape, and the world's best rugby team, we also are famous for something not so good, which is our lights going out in what we call load shedding, which is scheduled rolling electricity blackouts resulting from years of underperformance, some bad design, mismanagement, a lack of foresight for our coal power fleet. And the challenges arising from this declining coal sector are enormous and cannot be overstated. But here is also an opportunity for economic diversification, which will only happen if we plan, if we invest correctly, and if we manage the risks especially for vulnerable communities during this time. At the same time, there's another side to the story. So because of the climate transition, because of renewable energy innovation, decreasing costs over time, we have an additional toolkit for our development and for our industrialization. So bringing an increasing share of renewables has enabled accelerated transformation, which has been enabled through an accelerated transformation of our energy policy landscape. This is both at a subnational scale, at an urban scale, at a large national scale for large utility plants. We've also brought on board significant private sector investment, which has allowed us to now go from more than 10% and growing renewable energy share of our local electricity production. But what's more important what's as important and more important when we think about the future, given that this share is going to go up, is how do we make this work for economic development? And yes, there are direct employment opportunities in renewables. We will, of course, have increasing energy security because of them too. But there are also industrial opportunities in the renewable energy value chain, and what we do with these renewables in other industries to enable their transition, decarbonization, development, and growth is just as critical. So climate finance in South Africa has already been boosted by our renewable energy investment. It stands currently at about $7 billion a year. It needs to go up 3 times or maybe 5 times, depending on what we can do, how ambitious we are. We also have what we call our South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, which is our industrialization master plan for renewable energy value chains. We're focusing here on battery manufacturing, solar panels, wind turbines, cabling, and other components to a lesser extent. So in terms of green industrialization, we also have a significant opportunity when it comes to sectors like, for example, green iron and steel, which is connected to our solar potential and the production of green hydrogen. We also have policies and plans here, but very significantly, we need the right kinds of international partnerships to get those initiatives off the ground and thriving. Like Indonesia, We also have a large share of minerals that are a proud part of our economic history and are also critical not only for our transition, but for the global transition. We have platinum group metals, we have manganese, and again, like Indonesia, we are an economic power in our region. So we don't just have plans for ourselves, but to use our growth, our plan, integrated with that of our neighbors for shared prosperity. So, how are we leading? Well, South Africa was the smallest economy up on that slide, but it's a dynamite comes in small packages situation, like me, and we do punch above our weight. So, while this transition certainly has economic opportunities embedded in it, these opportunities, just like the climate risks that we all face, are not equally distributed, and we know this, as Nicole pointed out to us. This is why questions of justice in relation to the transition are really critical. Just transitions are about navigating the nexus, the intersection between global climate change, net zero transitions, and the challenge of growing inequality within countries and between them. So through the UNFCCC, through the G20 presidency that South Africa currently has, we've been very active in advancing a framing of the just transition, which has been alerting the global community to the need for whole of economy, whole of society transitions. This is not just a technical switch from one energy source to another, but it is about transforming the entire economy and transforming the economy's relationship to people and to the planet as well. So what can we do as middle powers together? Well, we can certainly pool our power to make sure that the global transition is about what we all need and is not just defined by great powers or by dire need, but by really this transformative vision, which I think has been truly articulated and will be articulated, I'm sure, by the other speakers as well. We can share our experience and our knowledge. South Africa was the first country to have a just energy transition partnership. Indonesia came after us, did better than us. I hope you learned something from our mistakes. We can work together, not just our governments, but just like we are in this space, our universities, our think tanks, civil society, businesses, we can identify common or complementary economic interests, risks, and opportunities that we can push for ourselves in our regions. And lastly, we can lead. We can raise global ambition. We can make sure that even though we stand this moment of fraught geopolitics, that climate change does not get taken off the table. We can work together, we can push together for shared prosperity, for our people, for each other's people, that does not come at the expense of other countries.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lauren. Thank you. We'll do a deeper dive later. Now I'll go to Will Nankervis, who is the first Assistant Secretary of the Climate Diplomacy and Development Finance Division of DFAT, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia. You're probably the only government guy here on the lineup. You're not really government. You're sort of half government. Yeah.
I'm the only government guy and the only male on the panel as well.
That's true. So please tell us about Australia. Australia is the largest coal producer in the world. Indonesia is number 2. So what does green growth mean to Australia?
Well, thanks Pak Dino, thanks to FPCI. Selamat siang, selamat siang. So I wanted to just start with the Australia-Indonesia relationship because this is so important to Australia. Our Prime Minister was recently, or government was recently returned, and of course the government chose, the Prime Minister chose for his first visit to come to Indonesia, and that was really important to him. And our Prime Minister has made clear that no relationship's more important to Australia than our relationship with Indonesia. So it's really great to be here for this Net Zero Summit. We had a great discussion yesterday, 1.5-track dialogue on middle powers and climate action, and a couple of key takeouts from that discussion. The first, like colleagues have said, is that middle powers like Australia, Indonesia, Brazil, South Africa, Turkey have a really critical role to play in working together, including through the multilateral system, which Australia strongly supports. And I think a second key takeout, and others have said it, Prof. Murray said it just now, climate action's an opportunity. It doesn't need to be seen as a burden, but it's a real opportunity, an economic opportunity. An opportunity when it comes to clean energy technology, when it comes to economic security, when it comes to jobs for all our people. So a question for you, when you think of Australia, what do you think about? Does anyone here think about kangaroos when they think of Australia? I do, I think of kangaroos when I think of Australia. Next slide, please. So you can think about kangaroos when you think of Australia, but we hope you'll also think about Australia as a global leader when it comes to climate action. Also importantly, a key partner for Indonesia when it comes to climate action. So what's Australia doing on climate action? Well, we hope that we're making strong progress. We have legislated our net zero targets, a 43% emission reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050. So those are enshrined in law in Australia. And those are not just climate commitments, but they're economic signals, economic commitments. We want to send a clear signal to our investors, our industries, our communities about climate action. And we're on track with those targets. So each year, we have an independent report to the Australian Parliament that talks about how we're going against those targets. And I'm pleased to say that the most recent report, it was tabled just a few weeks ago, showed that we're on track. So what's Australia doing? How is it that we're on track? Next slide, please. So this slide, of course, you can't read it, but it's just designed to show all the areas in which we are making progress. So in the transport sector, the building sector, industry and resources sector, the electricity sector. And I'll give a couple of examples. Our big economic agenda in Australia is called the Future Made in Australia agenda. We've invested over $60 billion in things like our electricity grid, green metals and hydrogen, and building clean energy infrastructure. But it's not just the government that's making progress and driving this transformation. If you can go back a slide, please. Back to the one with the solar. Yeah, so Australians love solar. The Australian people love solar. We have a lot of sun in Australia, and in fact, more solar radiation falls on Australia than in any other country. And a third of our homes have solar systems on them, photovoltaic systems. So when you fly over Australia, I was telling colleagues yesterday, when you look down out of the plane window, you see a lot of wind farms, you see a lot of solar arrays. But when you travel over our cities, you see what you see in this image here, which is house upon house with solar panels on its roofs. A third of Australian homes, again, photovoltaic systems. So solar's a really good news story there. Next slide, please, and the next one. So this graph really shows the path that Australia has been on and the path that it's going on in terms of our energy transition. So 15 years ago, 90% of electricity in Australia came from coal. Today, coal is less than 50%, and we estimate that by 2037, it will be zero. Coal won't contribute anything to energy production in Australia. Now, back again to Australia and Indonesia. Australia and Indonesia, we're not only close neighbours, but we're partners by choice. Our cooperation is really strengthening, and nowhere is that more so than in climate and energy. Take Kinetic, the Australia-Indonesia Climate and Infrastructure Partnership. Kemitraan untuk Iklim, Energi Terbarukan dan Infrastruktur, valued at $200 million. So a couple of examples. So one is that under the Kinetic program, we're expanding the markets for climate-focused small and medium-sized enterprises by building ecosystems of women entrepreneurs with training and technical assistance. Australia is also supporting the expansion of e-motorcycles and battery swapping stations. So you'll be seeing more and more e-ojeks on the streets of Jakarta. And our export finance agency recently signed an MOU with PLN to develop a $200 million capital financing facility for Indonesia's energy transition. I could give you lots more examples, but those are just a few. Now finally, into the last slide, COP31. So Australia's bidding to host COP31 in partnership with the Pacific. This would be the first COP ever held in the Pacific region. And our aim is to show the existential impact of climate change on small island developing states, and particularly Pacific Island countries. This would demonstrate real partnership between developed and developing countries. And if we are successful in our bid to host, we want to work really closely with Indonesia, with Brazil, with South Africa, with Turkey, and with all countries to develop really ambitious climate action. Thank you very much. Terima kasih banyak. Look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Will. I now turn to Bengisu Ozen from Turkey. Thank you for coming all the way from Ankara to join us here today. She's the Director of Sustainable Economics and Finance Association in Turkey. So Bengisu, please share us the green growth strategy of Turkey. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank all the participants for their interest in this panel. And I was actually under the pressure of matching up with the presentation that you gave in the morning, and all the colleagues talking about, you know, the ambition in their own countries. And I was almost regretting coming up with some graphs, but thanks to Will, you already showed some graphs, so I'm in the secure place. So what we are doing in Sustainable Economics and Finance Association is that, so we are trying to support the mainstreaming of climate policy in Turkey through, you know, building economic and financial narrative. So we are trying to build that bridge between the industrial policy, labor policy, financial policy. And we think that it is very important in terms of, you know, getting a coherent climate policy. And through our research, we are also helping building the knowledge-based advocacy campaigns to push Turkey for, you know, more ambitious targets. So I thought that it would be good to start with visualizing where Turkey is standing, you know, from different perspectives. And I think it is also useful in understanding the motives behind, you know, Turkey's transition. One, Turkey is located geographically in the Mediterranean basin, which is one of the most fragile geographies in the world in terms of, you know, facing the climate crisis. So in Turkey, we are exposed to extreme weather conditions, extreme heat, flood, droughts, and wildfires, and these are like putting a lot of pressure on the economy as well. Of course, you know, these are like humanitarian crisis, natural crisis. From the energy geography, well, Turkey is actually not a fossil-rich country, even if, you know, we are pushing for employing a lot of, you know, coal. We don't have the, you know, quality coal. Most of the coal is imported. So it is important to realize that when we are talking about, you know, having the coal plan in our national energy, it is actually adding up to the financial distress in Turkey. But we are neighboring some of the fossil-rich countries, so major oil and natural gas exporters. And Turkey is very much dependent on imports from those countries in terms of oil and gas. And also we are also very much impacted by the geopolitical tensions within the region. And we are also, by the way, we are talking about, you know, bridging. So we are also bridging, you know, Asia to the Europe, and since, you know, we are neighboring the Europe, EU is one of the, you know, most ambitious regions in the world in terms of net zero. And since they are trying to get neighboring countries and their trade partners into, getting more ambitious targets, Turkey is also feeling that kind of pressure within the country. So it is the imposing the trade regulations, such as the carbon border adjustment mechanisms. It is really motivating Turkey to, think about, having more renewables in the system. Yet, they are more concerned about their own energy security and competitiveness issues. But Turkey is also standing at a very important position in terms of diversifying the energy resources and also supporting the energy cooperation with the EU, diversifying their trade markets as well. Well, this picture actually here is showing where Turkey is standing in terms of its solar and wind potential. Turkey is very lucky in terms of, the red regions show the dark red shows how, Turkey is rich in solar and wind potential. And what we are doing with this potential is that the next slide will show how Turkey is, increasing its ambition. In the next slide, please. Yeah. So these are the targets announced first in 2017. It was the government was ambitious, and it was ambitious back then. Having 1 gigawatt of solar and 1 gigawatt of wind installed capacity annually in the coming 10 years. But they just in 5 years, they doubled their target to 1.5 gigawatts of solar and 3 gigawatts of solar and 1.5 gigawatts of wind installments, additional capacity by 2035. But just in 2 years later, the government actually doubled their target. So where we're standing right now is Turkey is looking for 120 gigawatts of installed capacity in renewables, solar and wind, by 2035. It's very ambitious. It's quadrupling the current installed capacity in solar and wind. And actually what this picture is doing, actually it is supporting Turkey's net zero target by 2053. So this picture is compatible with the net zero pathway that the climate community is also working on. So we are actually at a very lucky point. And what we are doing in terms of installing these capacities, this is also helping Turkey to increase its investments in the production of renewable energy equipments. And Turkey is one of the largest equipment provider for the EU market as well. So there's this industrial perspective, of course, employment perspective and regional development perspective to this kind of increased ambition in renewables. So, but on the flip side, so everything is good in terms of renewable targets and etc. So what are we doing, such as the NGO who is working for more ambitious targets? We are not out of our targets actually. So we are still holding on to our jobs. Maybe the next slide will show how the NGOs are still relevant to this picture. So yes, Turkey has a net zero target by 2053, but its midterm targets are still not matching that target. The upward sloping line is showing what Turkey is targeting its NDC, current NDC. So we heard, Anna Tochi's and Simon Steele's speeches that, the ambitious NDCs are very important, and we are looking for a more ambitious target for Turkey as well, for its NDC. But the current NDC, we are peaking our emissions by 2038, and up until 2030, Turkey's emissions will be, even under the mitigation scenario, Turkish emissions will be following its historical level. But what the climate NGOs are asking, the downward sloping line, which will be in line with 2053 target, and it is also very compatible, closer to the World Bank's country climate and development report targets. So this is what the science is saying. This is compatible with the net zero targets, and we won't be, putting excessive finance to support the current emission level, which would also, support the fossil-based economy. So what we are doing as the climate NGO, we are, holding the government responsible for its targets and, keep the emission reduction pathway compatible with the net zero target. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Bengozi. Yes. But Mary, let me get back to you about JETP. Yeah, JETP is a program that international donor program that would help us take out coal in our energy system. Yeah, help us decarbonize the energy system. We had $20 billion, and that was more than what South Africa got, was 8 billion. But it seems now it's having a problem. Tell us what is the status. American money has pulled out of JETP, and I think it was quite significant money. What is happening to JETP now? Yeah, is it inactive, alive, sick, or dead?
Well, I'll answer your question, but I think let me just have 2 or 3 chapeau remarks leading to the answer, because it kind of reflects all that's been talked about just now. That, when we talk about having ambition in climate action for middle powers who are especially the developing countries, it's always how do you balance that with development, right? Yes, ambition. We always say, yes, ambition, we want to be ambitious, but we can't do it alone. We need international help, contributions, whether it's funding or technology or whatever. So I think that's kind of one layer. The other layer is that when you talk about ambition and having growth and climate, there's also another dimension, which is the just and affordable transition, which I think Indonesia, South Africa, we're very focused on. So it's not just about, okay, let's exit from coal, get renewable energy in. It's at what price, and who's going to be the losers and the gainers? Because unless you have that holistic picture and understand the development dimension, you are not going to be very successful in being able to achieve the ambition. So I think I've just simplified, I suppose, what are the challenges that we all face when we're trying to come up with this ambition, but at the same time also achieve development. So Just Energy Transition Partnership is an example of how we could get it wrong, or maybe I shouldn't say that, that there were weaknesses or vulnerabilities in the way, in the approach. Because in the first instance, it came as a G7 proposal, without really thinking through all these challenges that I just mentioned, right? And it was focused on coal exit. And when they figured out, okay, coal exit, yes, you got to get out of coal. You're the largest emitters of coal-fired power plants. Therefore, you got to get out of coal. And then we said, okay, we'll get out of coal, but who's going to pay for it, right? Because there's a big difference in the climate transition, especially in going from fossil fuel to renewable energy, is a different proposition for US and Europe compared to us. In US and Europe, you're talking about coal-fired power plants, which are already 30, 40, 50 years old. In our part of the world, maybe South Africa also has older plants. But certainly in a number of other countries, especially in Asia, China, they're like 10, 15 years old. You have another 20, 30 years. Who's going to pay for that, right? Okay, we'll get out, but pay for it. That's when the 20 billion came in. But by the way, there's no money there. Yes. I think you can ask South Africa, the 8 billion, actually, they were just pledges there wasn't much, has been no money inflow or very little. Yeah? So the 20 billion that was promised to us was 10 billion supposedly coming from bilateral concessions as well as guarantees. And 10 billion was supposed to come from the private sector. So not from government. So anyway, the main issue with the Just Energy Transition Partnership was that it was just focusing on coal exit. Then we said, no, this is not right. You've got to look at it comprehensively, which is what all of our countries' growth strategy, sectoral plans try to get at. It's about coal exit. Then how do you clean up? How do you repurpose? It's about what do you do with the people who were working in that region or in that area? How can you then replace it with renewable energy that's going to be affordable to the lower part of the population? And how do you build out the grid? And where are the technologies going to come from? And then there's the renewable investment. So you have to look at it holistically. And that probably will require more than $20 billion. It actually will require something like 100 or 200 billion. And where's the money going to come from? And it's not just about the money. This is what we always try to emphasize, that it's about, if you want private sector to come in, you've got to have this credible country platform in energy, for instance, to say, okay, we're going to have this. It means our energy plan has to be like this, like feed-in tariffs for the renewable energy has to be attractive. The subsidy is a big issue within energy. We've got to reduce the subsidies on lowering the price of energy, which will still increase the consumption of fossil fuel, and switch it to direct subsidy to poor households. So there's a fiscal policy element. And then there are a lot of other policy and institutional issues in there, including the role of PLN within that, right? South Africa has the same issue with, what's the name of your state-owned electricity company? Eskom, right? So because when I was at the World Bank, we were actually looking at all these issues. So there's a lot of issues there that need to be dealt with, and some of it is up to the government to do in terms of the policy reforms. But if you want financing, including international financing, and if you want private sector, you've got to design that whole of government, whole of economy, and whole of society platform in a credible and realistic way to be able to attract the investments and the financing to come in.
Okay. At some point, I want to ask you about Danantara in here, but I want you to think about it. Yeah, how do they fit in this? But I want to get to Lauren. So JETP Indonesia is how about South Africa? What's going on with the 8 billion and the program? Is it moving? How is it going?
Okay, I'll start with the good news. So I think the idea of a country platform is essential. It's an endogenous, it's a homemade vision for your energy transformation and for the broad economic transformation that needs to happen intertwined with that. So that was a really positive and unprecedented feat in South Africa, bringing diverse interests together. The unions for the workers in the coal mines, government officials, private sector, from the renewable side, from fossil fuel side, from every part of society, civil society. We were all involved in that process. So that's really good, and that stood us in good stead because, like you said earlier, it's about sending the right signals, giving people clarity on your direction of travel. So that's been very positive. Now, 8.5. So it's not 8.5, as you said. These are pledges, and some of those pledges are certainly not going to come through. And there's some creative accounting around that too. But what it forced us to do was to start actually in quite a lot of detail costing our transition. So it's not going to cost us 8.5 billion. It's going to cost us hundreds of billions of dollars over many, many years. And some of the money has started to flow. So we've seen some money flowing into transmission infrastructure, which is really critical. We can think of that as the highways of the electricity system, right? Not as much into distribution, which are like the local roads, right, that take it to our homes and our factories. And transmission financing is not very easy. So that is a significant achievement to start that flow of money. But so what I will say is that where South Africa has been successful, and I think this is true probably for all our countries, is that actually renewable energy finance, the majority of it is domestic finance. The majority of it comes from equity and debt finance. It comes from actually our banks. We have a sophisticated and deep capital market in South Africa. So, moving domestic capital is really essential. And then another point is to say, we don't need, I'm not going to say we don't need climate finance. Do not quote me on that. We need climate finance. That's a very specific kind of, I would say it's like a lever. But actually what you need to do is you need to look at the flows of capital and make sure that these are compatible with your planned transition pathway. It's finance for a transition, not just transition finance. So this is a much bigger, more strategic conversation that we need to have, and it's public and private, and we need to think about key institutions like multilateral development banks. We need to think about the way that we plug holes in our own institutions as well, in our public finance at the local level, at the national level, things that are working, things that aren't working. And then, what is really hard to finance? I mean, when you think about financing utility-scale renewable energy, this is good business. In South Africa, it's really good business. Because we are classified as a high-risk country, 10 to 12% return, on your finance. Now, because we're grey-listed, it's more like 15 to 20%. So that's a pretty good return of investment. I don't know if any of you have a share portfolio, but you'd be very happy with that return, right? So that's not where we need the concessionary finance. That's not where we need the grants. The grants are both for dealing with vulnerability, where the business case is not very good, or there isn't a business case, it's a cost. It's a cost of moving us forward. And also for new and experimental opportunities in new value chains, particularly, or greened value chains where it's quite complex and we don't actually know exactly how it's going to work to transition those industries. So that's where we need the innovation, and that's where we need the finance innovation too.
Okay. Will, your climate ambition is legislated, right? Just tell us a bit about it. When was it legislated? Because I would love for Indonesia's climate ambition to be legislated. And it seems to be very difficult. And secondly, your climate ambition, does it have any international component? For us, it used to be 26-41, 26 our own means, and 41 with international support. Yeah. Do you have that latter part in terms of international support? Yeah.
Thanks, Dino. Yeah, so as you mentioned, our climate targets are legislated. They were legislated in 2022. And the two components are our 2030 goal, so 43% reduction by 2030, and then net zero by 2050, so enshrined in law, as you say. And that law also includes provision for annual reports to the Parliament. So we have an independent report to the Parliament, independent, transparent, sort of best practice that tracks our progress. So we're not marking our own report card. We have an independent marker on that, and that's showing that we're on track. The most recent report showed that we're on track.
You're not counting for international support or international financing or anything?
Well, what I would say in response to your question is that we do welcome foreign investment absolutely in our energy transition. And in fact, a big component of our domestic economic agenda, our Future Made in Australia, is about attracting investment. So it's called a Future Made in Australia, but we say a Future Made in Australia doesn't mean a future made alone. It means a future made with partners. And Of course, we're working really hard to encourage Australian investors to invest more in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia. We have a Southeast Asia economic strategy that's geared towards that. But we also welcome investment from across the world, but including from our Southeast Asian partners in Australia. And we have great examples of Philippines companies investing in renewable energy in New South Wales, Thai companies investing in wind power, for example, in Queensland. So foreign investment is a really important part of that. But one of the things that we can really bring as Australia is our capital markets. Our pension fund scheme is really huge. We have $3 trillion, and that's growing at a trajectory like that. It's got to go somewhere, and we want more of that investment to go into Southeast Asia to power the energy transition. Just finally, in terms of finance, of course, we have our external financing commitments as well. And we've gradually strengthened those commitments. And at the moment, it's $3 billion over the 5 years to 2025, so to this year. We're well on track to meet those financing targets, well on track.
Okay, well, good. That's good news. Thank you. Nicole, I'm very happy to hear 90% of your electricity is renewables. For a big economy, it's unheard of, to be honest, right? But as you said, Brazil is giving oil concessions blocks in Amazon. You know, do you see this as a step back or not?
It's definitely a step back. So during COP28, Brazil joined OPEP during the COP. Brazil keeps signaling that we want to become the 4th largest oil producer in the world. So at the same time that we reduce deforestation, we are from the power sector, we are renewable, even though we are carbonizing the matrix now, building power plants based on natural gas, which is not natural at all, it's a fossil gas. We are, on the energy perspective, we are developing biomass, biofuels, it's great, but we are carbonizing it. And to talk about a little bit COP30 and how Brazil is hosting it. So we, as you heard Anatoni, we do a good homework. We have good numbers to show and drive ambition. We were one of the first countries to write an NDC and present this year, and have been writing letters to other countries kind of pushing for ambition. But it's kind of like a glass ceiling if you are becoming the 4th largest oil producer in the world, talking about climate ambition. And on the other hand, there was a promise from Lula when he was elected to create a climate authority, something similar to what you're proposing for Indonesia, to have somebody who has an oversight of all the ministries and all the policies that are being written. And this never happened. So it couldn't get out of promise from the election time. And we have a Congress that is very anti-climate right now. So we are having a really hard time to approve legislation. We are under, there's a change on the environmental licensing process right now, where the Congress is proposing a self-license. So the companies would basically go online, fill a form, and be licensed, including oil companies. And if we are offering blocks in the Amazon right now, the Amazon basin, offshore, but also on land. And that creates a more liability and risk for the forest and for the biome that we are decreasing deforestation for. We are also approving laws in the Congress that extend subsidies to coal and to gas, which is slowing down the transition. But, you know, the civil society, we wrote a paper and we made a modeling that shows that we can go carbon neutral by 2045, not 2050. And we have a pathway, and it's very possible, growing and decarbonizing industry, decarbonizing transportation and the matrix. So we have the ecologic transformation plan is a great plan. It's very ambitious, but it's not in line with Congress. So that for us, it's the biggest challenge of being a climate leader outside, but inside tackling with this kind of things.
Okay. Bengozi, maybe just 1 minute answer on Turkey is in the middle of so many war zones, right? In Europe, in the Middle East, and so on. And I'm sure your government is very nervous about your strategic environment. But is this affecting your net zero green growth strategy in any way?
Of course, I mean, all these geographical tensions are overshadowing the ambition in the decarbonization. But Turkey's target is there; it's achievable, and looking at the same picture of geographical tensions, you can also see that how fragile these fossil-based economies are. So it is also in terms of international relations. It makes logic to transition away from fossil fuels. So. And especially for a country as Turkey, which is importing its fossil fuels, it is a logical way to do it. Invest in more renewables, diversify its energy resources. Yeah, the target is there, the ambition is there, but we are still, waiting for a more ambitious NDC in the coming months, hopefully.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, but I'm not going to let you get away yet with Danantara. So I'll let you have 1 or 2 minutes. I really want to know, Danantara is our sovereign wealth fund. It's the biggest news economically and business-wise in Indonesia. They got gazillions of money. And so the question is, will they fit in our net zero future? Is there clear signs that they will fit into our net zero future?
This is not fair. You have home advantage giving me all the hard questions. Let me just give 3 points quickly. One, just to follow up on our South African colleague issue about energy transition. The advantage of what happened with JETP was that it really actually made us domestically get together. And that was true for the last 3 years. And we had very strong coordination between all the different ministries. And we came up with 440 projects, which was curated down to 70 projects. But then we changed in government. Now we hit the hard questions, which is getting to where Danantara should fit in. Because we have the perennial issue, so this is very much to your political constraint issue, that we always have this issue about Article 33 in our Constitution, that whatever is belonging to the earth and affecting people's livelihoods is owned by the government. And that's why our electricity law is production, distribution, and transmission of electricity is the monopoly of PLN, right? And that is part of the problem of our energy transition, yeah? Maybe it's quite similar to ExCom. And therefore, what should be the role of Danantara? Because I do think in the net zero target of Indonesia, energy transition is crucial. Yeah, of course we can talk about FOLU and so on, but let's just focus on energy transition. Because if you recall, Danantara's role is not just about investing. It's also about state-owned enterprise reforms. So I think energy transition and net zero can only happen if we do address the policy reforms and institutional reforms that can make the energy transition happen and conducive environment for renewable energy, for the development of the grid, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you have to look at the 2 sides of Danantara, which is the SOE reforms on one hand, the operational side, and then the investment side would be where they would fit in terms of investing, co-investing perhaps with PLN on, I think the important part is the development of the modern grid as well as the renewable energy. We should be accelerating renewable energy. We should be building out the modern grid, and we will still have coal-fired power plants. We should make them more efficient, reduce the emission as much as possible, and carbon capture and storage. So I think you have to have this strategy, and we hope that Danantara will be able to contribute in that way.
You're a true diplomat also. Thank you. Well done. Well done. All right, well, let's give a big hand to all the panelists, and thank you very much. And we'll go to the next session.
Thank you so much to our moderator, Bapak Didopati Jalal. Kami mohon berkenan moderator dan juga all the speakers, please come forward to take a photo session. Silakan kepada tim dokumentasi untuk bisa mengabadikan momen yang sangat luar biasa dengan para speakers. Kita tentunya mendapatkan banyak sekali insight-insight. Dan ini adalah penyerahan token of appreciation langsung dari APCI. Dan hadirin, kita juga masih akan ada sesi yang ketiga. Nanti kita akan segera memasuki sesi semoga kali ini lebih baik, perlunya gaspol transisi energi bersih. Sesi kali ini nanti akan dimulai pada pukul 14.55. Jadi hadirin jangan kemana-mana. Baik hadirin sekalian, so let's take a picture together. Please come forward in front of the desk. Perhaps, oke, di sini aja. Oh, please come forward in front of the desk. Ya, let's take a picture together. And please show the camera the t-shirt, the cool t-shirt from FPCI. 1, 2, 3, and once again, give the best smile. 1, 2, and 3. Please give a big round of applause for our amazing speakers and our moderator. Thank you so much, Bapak Dinopati Jalal, and thank you so much to all amazing speakers. You can remain, you can please come to your seat. Hadirin sekalian, terima kasih banyak. Dan tadi adalah sesi yang kedua, kita berbicara mengenai Middle Powers Rising. Kiat negara-negara yang sukses menjalankan kebijakan iklim menjadi pertumbuhan ekonomi di abad ke-21. Dan hadirin sekalian, nanti kita juga akan segera ke sesi berikutnya, yaitu semoga kali ini lebih baik. Perlunya gaspol transisi energi bersih yang akan dimulai pada pukul 14.55. Jadi hadirin rekan-rekan, jika ingin pergi ke toilet atau juga ingin melaksanakan sholat zuhur atau nanti sholat asar, itu terletak di lantai 2 sudah kita sediakan musola. Jangan lupa untuk tetap tag ke Instagram dari FPCI, jangan lupa hashtagnya apa? INZS 2025. Hadirin sekalian, kita akan berjumpa lagi pukul 14.55, so see you.